And we're back finally to talk some hockey. We got what's pretty much the biggest news we've had about the NHL in months coming this week. It sounds like the season is good to go, January 15th, 16th starting date for a 56 game season, and a very interesting division setup that is happened because of the Canadian US border situation in sports. So the Toronto Raptors and the Toronto Blue Jays have both asked the Canadian government, hey, can we play in Toronto? And the Canadian government has said no, because they're the only Canadian team in their respective leagues. It's been simpler for management to just move the team south of the border and then compete with the rest of the American teams. With hockey, not so simple, as you've got 7 Canadian teams. Because those teams all can't travel back and forth between the border, the solution the NHL has adopted is make a division of just those 7 teams. What are your first thoughts on that?
I like it because we have been missing out on some Canadian rivalries in the last couple of seasons. So it'll be awesome to see the Leafs go up against the Canadians more frequently and go up against the Senators more frequently, and we'll get our more looks at the Canucks, Oilers, Flames, Jets. I just think it'll be good for Canadian hockey as a whole to get to build up a lot more of these rivalries, because if they're playing all these games against those 6-7 teams, it's going to feel more like playoff hockey in the regular season because these teams will see each other more often. So I really love it from that perspective in terms of building rivalries, and
And not
hopefully
just
we'll
the
see that.
rivalries you said, sorry to cut you off, but we'll also see like what teams float to the top and what rivalries develop there. Like maybe we get a Leafs Canucks rivalry going because those are the top 2 teams.
Yeah, exactly. And in terms of top teams, like besides the Senators, I think any one of these Canadian teams has a shot at winning this division. Like I think and the NHL itself there's a lot of parity, but there's no clear favorite here. Like the Leafs have a ton of talent, but the Jets have a lot of offensive firepower. The Flames have a lot of offensive firepower. The Oilers have McDavid and Draisaitl. The Canucks just added Markstrom, and they've got Pettersson and Besser and those guys. And the Canadians are, I think, they've made changes that have best suited them for the playoffs. They're gritty. They play hard, and they got a guy to give Carey Price some rest. So like this Canadian division is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
This is going to be awesome.
Now, I'm a little worried about the travel. I don't know how the schedule is going to work out, if because you've kind of got your west and your east. I think it's a little easier in the east to travel between Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, as opposed to Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, and then you got Winnipeg sitting kind of in the middle there, a little closer to us. So I don't know what the scheduling looks like with like one team just showing up and doing like a stretch of like those 3 cities, maybe some back to backs, and then the teams are alternating. I haven't heard any talk about a hub city. That would kind of make more sense to me with this division approach, but I don't think it's going to happen.
I think the players are pretty against going back into a bubble after what happened with the playoffs and how tough it was on some of those guys. Um, I think you're going to see a similar format that the NBA is trying to implement, where a team like Toronto is going to go to Winnipeg and play them 3 times in a row. And then they're going to head to Edmonton and play them twice, and then Calgary twice, and then Vancouver 3 times. So they really like maximize the number of games they get in as they move further away. And that only serves again to build up kind of these playoff vibes, right? Where you're playing the same team twice, 3 times in a row. So you get familiarized, and there's some bad blood brewing. So I'm not against that type of format. It'd just be interesting to see with that kind of format. If you're catching a team in a slump, then you have 3 games against a team that's really struggling. So that's I think how the scheduling will turn out.
Yeah, and I think one other thing they're talking about is they've had the luxury of watching the NFL, and they're trying to figure out how to space the games to make just adjustments, they know they're going to have to. But I think that favors the Canadian division because just statistically, it's going to be less frequent. Players are catching COVID up here and having to pause than they are down there, and they're going to have to plan for it down there, which hopefully means it happens less frequently here. And the spacing they implement to service the American divisions will just give a lot of rest time to Canadian teams, and the jet lag they'll have to do going frequently between West Coast, East Coast will not be too much of a factor.
Yeah. And I think if you're considering playoffs, there will be hub cities, I think, but it won't be a bunch of teams coming to a bubble for 6 weeks on end. It'll be a little bit more conducive to maintaining players' personal lives, because I think what the format is right now is they've got 4 teams coming out of each division, which once again favors the Canadian division because they've got one less team than the other 3 divisions who have 8 teams. So that helps us send 4 teams. And you'll probably have a hub city for the first round, and then a different one for the second round, and a different one for third round, and for the finals.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more interested in hub cities just to reduce constant travel
Yeah.
than for the sake of bubbling. I think you can put in all the COVID protection measures you need, ask the players to be responsible, but just not have like every 3-4 days players having to fly 3,000 kilometers.
And then you're hoping by May and June we'll have access to a vaccine that might be able to help protect some of these guys, and then maybe you don't have to resort to hub cities by the time playoffs roll around.
Well, I think hub cities just make sense if you can't have home fans, because that's why you have home games and away games, and you have like the one that always comes to my mind for whatever reason is the Vancouver Canucks versus the Boston Bruins, just the travel that had to happen every 4 days in that series. So if you don't, it's worth it for the home fans, but if you can't do home fans because of COVID, then you might as well put it all in one city. I think it just makes better hockey, better
Yep.
any sport.
Yep. Speaking of reducing travel, there's already been a couple adjustments to the division alignment. The initial release by the NHL had, I'm not going to roll through the names, but it had some teams who were in the Central Division playing in the Pacific Division, because the Pacific, there's only kind of 5 or 6 teams on that West Coast that play in that Pacific time zone. So they needed to add 2 more teams to make the divisions equal. And initially, they had Dallas and they had St. Louis. I think they're going to keep St. Louis, but it looks like they're going to flip-flop Minnesota and Dallas just because Minnesota is closer to St. Louis. And so that way, when they're playing at home and against that other team, there's not as much travel and kind of feeding into what you were talking to. So then Dallas will move into the more central, even kind of east-looking American division. And Minnesota will move into the Pacific division.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, all the travel affects the players the most, but the players are the ones who asked for it so as to not be forced into a bubble again. So they'll they'll have to lump it a little, but I like that they're doing everything they can to minimize travel, and it seems like a smart move. Just you can have more of a little tour between you show up to St. Louis, then you show up to Minnesota.
Yeah.
Dallas is going to be tough though for all the other teams.
Yeah. Yeah. But Dallas, like, I don't think it's as far away from some of these places as you would think, like a Carolina, Nashville, Tampa Bay. It's not too bad. And Dallas is further from St. Louis than Minnesota is, so it just makes sense to kind of group those Minnesota and St. Louis together.
Yeah, I like the flexibility
Yeah.
that
The
they're
big
they're still making adjustments.
the biggest thing it will come down to is when the actual start date gets nailed in and what the season ends up looking like. We have these preliminary reports that seem pretty locked in, but anything could happen over the next couple of weeks that could shift things, and the players and owners still kind of refuse to move from their standpoints. So we just got to keep praying that the NHL is finally going to come back and we get to see these proposed divisions in action.
Yeah, we'll keep our finger on the pulse and keep everyone updated as it goes. But I think that's all we got to say for now.
Yeah, I believe so. Thanks for popping by, buddy. And everyone, thanks for listening. Once again, we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and we're hoping to grow our network. So if you like what you're hearing, give us a rating, pass it along to your friends. The more the merrier. We're just trying to get a conversation started with fans who know what they're talking about and have their own say.
Check us out Instagram, Twitter in order to engage in that conversation. Check us out on YouTube, leave comments. We're happy to reply.
Absolutely. Good to see you,
Till that,
buddy.
Sports Next Door signing off. Good to see you too, bud.